elk roamed from coast to coast prior to the European settlement in North America. However, due to overhunting and loss of habitat, eastern elk populations were wiped out. Most attempts in the early 1900s to reintroduce the animals to the areas they once called home were unsuccessful.
And that's because there was very little documentation of what was done, how things were done, and then there was very little monitoring of animals once they were released into their new environment, so that the fate of each individual animal is uncertain.
Now, with the help of the University of Kentucky, Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, elk are once again abundant in the hills of Appalachia. The decision to reintroduce elk was made after the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife conducted a feasibility study in 1996. In December of 1997, elk took their first steps on Kentucky soil. Modern technology has made the relocation process more successful because of the ability to gather information about the whereabouts of each animal.
UK's major role in this Kentucky elk restoration project is to monitor and document the reintroduction so that we can gather the information, the data, and draw some recommendations that will improve future release methodologies. And hopefully not only just for Kentucky's reintroduction attempt, but for other states in the surrounding area that want to attempt elk reintroductions. Every animal that is released into Kentucky during the first 2 years is wearing a radio collar. And that allows us to track the animals from aircraft.
The process is much more involved than just loading the animals onto a truck. Next, we'll take a look at the effort that goes into trapping the animals for transport. From the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service, this is Scott Hayes reporting. Prior to the elk being transported 1,900 miles back to Kentucky, they must first be captured. Successfully capturing the animals depends on the weather. Trappers must wait for snow to fall and cover any remaining forage on the ground, so the animals will be driven down from the mountains to feed on the alfalfa hay being used as bait. Trap sites are scouted with the help of private landowners.
Private ranchers have been really cooperative. This ranch here has been particularly good about it. They realize that we've got an over objective. We're over our numbers of elk that we should have here, and they've cooperated. They've cooperated with having hunts and everything.
Once the sites are baited and the animals are drawn in, the traps are constructed. Construction normally takes up to 8 hours and is the combined effort of the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources and the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife agents. Once the targeted group of animals has become accustomed to the trap, the trigger is set.
We set this elk trap here up about 3 days ago, and we've baited them inside the trap without setting the trigger on the door, let them get used to coming in and out. This is a string that's a trigger here. It's not set right now, it's kind of loose, but you just put a small pile of hay right in the corner here, and what the elk do is they fill up, and usually one will get kicked off, and it'll come over here and look and find this hay. It'll do is it'll stick its head underneath here and graze. And elk, as they're feeding, they're always lifting their head up. As soon as it lifts its head up, it pulls this trigger and releases the door. The last 2 nights we've trapped elk. The night before we had 8 elk, and the last night we had 14.
The traps are checked the next morning and set again until the quota of captured animals is reached. The captured animals are then transported back to Hardware Ranch, where they are held until they are ready for their trip across the country. In the next installment, we'll take a tour of the facilities at the Hardware Ranch, where the animals are processed for their road trip. For the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service, this is Scott Hayes reporting. Nestled in scenic Cache Valley, Utah, 17 miles from the nearest form of civilization, Hardware Ranch is home to the largest and longest studied elk herd in the western United States. The ranch's 14,000 acres provides habitat for a variety of other animals and an educational experience to some 80,000 visitors per year.
We've got numerous displays on wildlife, interactive displays. We've got hides and quizzes and things that the people can learn about wildlife and elk especially. We offer school programs to the local schools here. We usually get around 2,000 students that'll come through during the winter time.
Hardware Ranch also provides facilities for the Elk Restoration Project.
Hardware Ranch is one of the only elk handling facilities in the West. It's probably the best in that it's been designed specifically for working these animals through a series of chutes and corrals. You need to be able to catch your animals and hold them till you're ready to work them. You need to have the facility that you can work them through. And then you need to have the holding again so you can hold them till they're ready to go and have a mechanism of getting them onto the semi.
Upon arriving at the ranch, the elk are unloaded into a holding pen until the desired number of animals is captured to be transported. Once that number is reached, the animals will be run through a series of chutes where they undergo a plethora of blood work to be cleared of diseases prior to being collared.
There shouldn't be any real problems moving elk, Rocky Mountain elk, to what was formerly eastern elk country. They're historically plains animals. They're grazers. So with the reclaimed strip mine, they're just going back to a native grass range. Other than having an affinity for rangeland and agricultural crops at times, there shouldn't be any complications with moving elk back to the east.
Radio collars are supplied by the University of Kentucky. Every animal transported to Kentucky will wear a collar for the first 2 years. The collars allow the animals to be tracked from the air or from the ground. The last part of the journey begins when the elk are released in their new home. The final part of this series will take us to the hills of Appalachia to see how the animals are monitored and how well they adjust to their new homes. From the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service, this is Scott Hayes reporting. Elk arrive in Kentucky on a converted cattle trailer. The animals are released as soon as the truck arrives at the site to avoid further stressing the animals by keeping them confined. The relocation effort has been made possible by the community, who have welcomed the animals back with open arms.
So Kentucky, it means a returning part of our wildlife heritage. It also means it's going to mean a tremendous recreational opportunity for a lot of our public to watch elk and to someday hunt elk right here at home in Kentucky. The public is extremely enthused about the program. We received over 3,200 written comments about this project when we were thinking about it. 90% from around the state were for it. 99% of the people in this 14-county area are for it.
Ground zero for the Elk Restoration Project has been the reclaimed strip mines adjacent to Robinson Forest. The area provides the animals with the ideal habitat and vegetation they need.
Hey, we've got this vast area which is just open reclaimed mine land. There's plenty of herbaceous vegetation for them to forage on. We've got sediment ponds scattered throughout so they have a water source. And the next thing they have is around the whole periphery of this site, we have forested land, steep slopes with forest, which is a good escape route for them. Typically the elk are laying in the forested areas during the day, ruminating. Toward the evening and the nighttime, they're coming out into the open land and grazing.
Graduate students from the University of Kentucky monitor the animals from the air and the ground with UHF radio collars. The extensive monitoring takes place at least 3 times a week, allowing researchers to track the animals' movements. Most of the animals know right where home is.
Elk have this throughout the Northeast, or the eastern part of the United States, and even in the West. When they've been reintroduced, they've been shown to have this release site fidelity.
Even though these native Rocky Mountain elk have relocated, the population seems to be growing. New Kentucky calves have joined the herd this year. Each new animal born is one animal closer to the goal of the program.
The ultimate goal of the Kentucky Elk Restoration Project is to have a self-sustainable, that is a self-reproducing population numbering about 7,200 animals in approximately 20 years.
30 calves were born in the spring of 1998, with 23 surviving. For the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service, this is Scott Hayes reporting.